Right. Hey students, and welcome to our next session today on Capgemini training. Now, before we start, as usual, let me know if you're able to see the screen properly, if you're able to hear me properly, and we'll immediately start, guys. All right, perfect. So, in our last class, we looked at some basic concepts of a pointer to a base class, pointing to an object of a subclass. So, this is what we've seen. And one more thing we all need to know when it comes down to basic things is we have also seen that colon is an initialization list operator. We just need to know colon stands for initialization list. Always know that because that will be pretty important in our sessions up next. So let us go ahead from this particular question to the next question now. We did the 60 40 30 6 40 38 question, if I'm not wrong. Let me just check. Yes. I think we have, guys, we have done that earlier today, right? The one with outputs as 6 40 and 38, the three numbers. All right, yes, we have done it. All right, so let us go ahead and look at a few other interview questions that are often asked. All right, perfect. So again, most of the things we're going to start with right now will be based on inheritance because we haven't done a lot of questions based on inheritance. So let us work on these. We're going to look at a lot of new concepts here. So anywhere you feel like, sir, this is pretty new, you can just let me know. We'll make sure to work on the same in detail. So let's just take a couple of integers as int a comma b. Let's say in the constructor, we'll take, so we are taking up a parameterized constructor. Please remember this very clearly. And I'm using this operator. I hope you guys already know how this operator works very clearly. I hope there's no confusions in this particularly. And I'll just create an empty destructor. Um, let's, instead of empty destructor, let it not be there at all. So going ahead from there, let's just create a simple display function. Let's say called show, where all we are printing is just so I'm just going to add a few pre-increment and pre-decrement. If you guys observe, whatever values are sent, they are pre-incremented, pre-decremented, and then stored in A and B. Whenever I'm printing it, even then it is pre-decremented. And now we're going to take a derived class where in this derived class, we're going to create a couple of functions again, one called void inc, standing for increment. And here we're just going to increment y plus plus. It does not matter whether you do plus plus y or y plus plus, since it is the only statement in the function. And we will override the function. Remember, we are overriding a function. Any function that has same name in base class and subclass is called an overridden function. So we are overriding it by writing the same thing, minus minus b. So these are your entire base class and derived class. So just to make sure you're able to see the whole program, I'm just taking the brackets in the previous lines. So all we're going to do in main is just have a base class object, and we will call base.increment, and we will call base.display or base.show here. That's it. Now, this is your entire program. So if you guys observe this, what could possibly happen? So we're going to modify the same program slightly in the next case, but first I want you all to try this. Take a minute, and of course I'll tell you guys right now, throughout our sessions from now on, please keep responding as much as possible, as often as possible, because I will only get to know how well you guys are understanding or how well you guys know these concepts once you guys let me know with an answer. Unless you tell me with an answer, I will assume you know average or something like that, and I will go according to the speed. So having to receive your answers always helps out. Don't worry. There are no marks for this. So as much as you guys answer, it'll be really helpful for us to go through this. So please keep answering. Just make sure you guys keep responding throughout as much as possible. All right. Here, guys. First question. Observe this. It's just an object. I'm not storing any values also. Since I'm not storing any values, what do you think will happen? I'm not storing any values in here. I'm just calling the base A and B. I'm not storing any values explicitly. I'm just calling increment, just calling show. What do you think will happen, guys? Any answers? I need you guys to keep letting me know. This is what I need most. It's consider this like a small interview question itself. So just think about it. And I don't need you guys to type it down, execute it simultaneously or anything. Think of it as an interview. Just look at this and tell me the answer. That is all I'm expecting. That is all I'm asking for. Because once we start with data structures, there won't be so many questions. Now is the only time you're going to get so many questions, because in data structures, I will be explaining more. In here, I will be answering based on your answers. So guys, will it, okay, I'll give you two options. Will it execute or won't execute? Can you guys at least let me know this? Will it execute or will it not execute? All right, I've got one answer saying there is no. Nice. One of you have finally stated something. Yes, keep, this is what I want. Make sure you guys keep responding. So let's just go to the directory. Once I compile it, I'm going to get this particular error saying a lot of different errors. One, it says C++ forbids declaration of A with type like this. If you guys observe, it says, is this the base class name first? No. If it had void, then it would work. It does not have void, and it's not the same name as base class. So there's your first error. If you solve this first error and compile it, then you'll get your second error. Second error was that y was not declared. So once you realize that y was not declared, it is b or a, whatever it could be. Let us just change it to b, for example. Then once you compile again, you'll get your third error. The third error is that in this case, the base variable b, no matching function. You cannot write a parameterized constructor unless you have written a default constructor. See, in this case, the moment I create base b, if I do empty brackets, you'll see it's still an error saying that no matching function. If you remove base b brackets, you'll still get the same error. So to solve this, it says you are executing or you're creating an object of a class. First thing you guys need to know, whenever you create an object of a class, if you have a parameterized constructor, and you're creating an object without parameters, you must have a default constructor. Otherwise, you should not have this parameterized constructor at all. If I compile now, I'm not getting that error anymore. There is some different error. But the point I'm trying to make is, if you have a parameterized constructor, you must have a default constructor whenever you are creating an object without parameters. So let us create a default constructor just for the same case. Done. So once we have created the default constructor, now let us compile. Now we'll get one more error. This is the final error. That is, B does not have any method called increment, because increment is a method within derived class, and B is an object of base class. Derived class can have access to objects of base class, but base class cannot have access to functions or variables of derived class. So I need to remove the increment part. Only then it will work. So what I will do rather is, instead of base B, we'll make it derived D. And we'll call D.increment and D.show. This is what we're doing. And the moment we derive an object for D, we will also make sure there will be default values for this, like 5, let's call it as 0 default value, and this default value is 5. I hope you guys know, whenever we call this constructor, now that there are default values, now that we do have default values, if you compile this, you're getting a small error again, use of deleted function derived. So pretty much what's happening here is, in this case, when you call through derived object and it goes to base function, see, it says there are 2 candidates to call base class. See, you guys need to observe, the moment you create a derived object D, I'll try to explain this as detailed as possible, so you guys are able to understand this very clearly. So let me ask you guys one question. Whenever I create a derived object, will the base class, alright, whenever we create a derived object D, will the derived class constructor be called by default? My first question. Will the derived class constructor be called by default? You can answer as yes or no. Yes. Now, when derived class constructor is called by default, will the base class constructor also be called by default? My next question. I'm getting a few no's. Guys, remember we went through this yesterday, if I'm not wrong. If I'm not wrong, we went through this yesterday. Have we gone through this yesterday? Anybody who remembers this can answer me, can let me know. Have we gone through this yesterday, where whenever we call a derived class constructor, it will automatically call the base class constructor as its first line? If you guys remember, we went through this concept. Whenever we created a derived constructor and you typed anything like cout hello. So one of you remember that we have discussed this. Guys, for everyone else, please observe and remember this carefully. If you forget concepts of previous sessions, interview questions, this session will become very difficult for you to solve. This is the same thing that should not happen in interviews. This is why I want you guys to go through the content, go through the programs that we try out as much as possible. That is going to help you out. So going off to this, here, let me copy this and tell you the error that happens here is, overload candidates of base class constructor. Ambiguity. Perfect. Now, if you observe this, whenever we create a derived class object, derived class constructor gets called by default. Now, we do not have any derived class constructor here. It's empty. So default derived class constructor will be called. Now, whether you write a derived class constructor like derived and um, open bracket, close bracket, and some statements, or whether you leave it empty. However you do it, what you need to know is the first line of a derived class constructor, it will call base class constructor always. Whether you create a derived class constructor or there is no derived class constructor created, it will go to default derived class constructor. The first statement, whether you write it or whether you don't write it, by default will call base class constructor. Now, when it calls base class constructor, it will call something like base with empty brackets. Now, will it go for the first function or will it go for the second function? If you start to observe this is slightly confusing because, of course, it can go to first function because there are no parameters in it. It can also go to second function because both parameters in this constructor are optional. Since they are optional, you can leave them empty and enter a value. That means basically this second constructor can also be written as a base with empty brackets. Can I do this? Can I do this in short? Can we make it like this base class constructor, whatever we have, will be written without any statements? Will it still do the same work? My question to you guys, will it still do the same work? Let me know, guys. Keep your fingers on the chat so that I can I can understand whether you guys are understanding or not. Here, if I give a, do you guys know that these are default values? Do you guys know what these default values mean in parameters? Or do you want me to explain this first? You guys let me know. Do you guys know it or do you want me to explain it? All right, so keep letting me know, guys, until you guys text, until you guys let me know, I will not be able to understand. So keep responding, keep texting. That's the only way I will understand. All right. So if you don't know this, let me go back to one basic concept here. Let's just comment this whole part so that I can explain this in detail. So let's say you have some class called A. Now here in A, if you have just a constructor, let's say, where we print 1 and you have one more constructor, int A, int B, where we print 2. Or instead of 2, let us print A and B. A and the space and B. So this is easier. So all we do here is just take int main and we'll just return 0 and we'll just create an object of A. Now, which constructor will it call? The default constructor or the parameterized constructor? In this case, it's easy. It's very easy. It will call. All right, I have to make this public first. All right, making sure that it's public. Of course, it will call the default constructor. That is clear. So you will get 1 as the output. It's calling the default constructor. Now, if I do the same thing, instead of 1, instead of a, let's say if I give a of 10, 20, if I send these two values, it's going to send 10 as A, it's going to send 20 as B, and it's going to print 10 and 20 on the screen. That is also pretty clear. So if we try this, we are printing 10 and 20. That is also clear. Now, you can do one option, that is set B to have a default value. That means if you send a value for B, this means if you're sending this value over to B, sending this value over to A becomes 10. If you're sending this value over to B does not take it up as 0. B becomes 20 itself. Now, what happens here is, if I do not send my second value, then B becomes 0 by default. That is the condition. Here, if I don't send the second value, if I only send one value, that value will be taken to A, B will become 0. So I get my output as 10 and 0. Now, if I make one change, if I remove B equals 0, that means there is no default value. That means I must enter a second value. So if I don't enter a second value, I'll get an error saying you have two types of constructors. One takes no values, other takes two values, but you're entering only one value. So this is the error I will get. So default value means that you can set a default value like equal 0. That means whenever you're not sending a value, it will take the default value. Now, if I take this one as 3, this is 4, and I don't send the values, what will it print? Can you guys let me know what it would probably print? Simple question. Output must be pretty easy. Getting different answers, 3, 4, and 1. Now, here's where you guys need to understand this very carefully. When I'm calling this, let's say it can go to first one. It can easily go to first one. Only one of you got the answer properly. So let me explain for others. Here, it can go to the first value. So I have one more question. What if we send only default value to A? You cannot do that. Default value should be provided from right to left. If you give default value not to B, but only to A, then you'll get a compile time error saying for A default value is provided, but for B it is not provided. If you want to provide default value for A, you must provide default value for B, because default values are always provided from right to left. This is the basic concept to know. Now that we understand this, let us go back to this question. It can go to first constructor because I'm not sending any value. It can also go to second constructor because both values are default. Since both values are default, this will also accept 0 values. It will also accept 0 values. In that case, where will it go? Will it go to the first one or will it go to the second one? Can you guys let me know? So let me know, guys. I just want you guys to let me know whether it will go to the first or the second constructor or what will happen. Only one of you has answered this correctly. Others think over this again. Will it go to the first one or will it go to the second one? I'll give you guys 10 to 20 more seconds. Think through and put your answer in chat. I will wait for the same. In this case, it goes to neither one. Remember, whenever you have two functions with same data type, same parameters. Both are having zero parameters essentially because both can take zero parameters. Both have same return type. Both have same functions. This is where ambiguity happens. Remember the concept of function overload. Remember, in the concept of function overloading, instead of here, let me explain it here. It's better. Okay. Yeah, perfect. In case of function overloading, you guys know that there should be two functions like a of nothing and a of int a and something like a of int a comma char b or something like a of just char b char a or something like that. So as long as there are different type of parameters or different number of parameters, then it is overloaded perfectly. But when you specify that in the second one, it can be default as well. That means first and second functions have no difference. Or if I do this, let's say for example, second and third functions have no difference. Then when I call a of int a, when I call something like a of 10, in that case, should this go to a of int a or should it go to a of int a comma char b equals 0 because b is by default 0? Which one should it go to? It doesn't know. So this is where you get a confusion. Compiler gets confused and it says, I don't know which function to go. I will say it's an error. Say exact same thing happens here. It does not know which one to go. It gives you an error. This happens when you have two functions where one has everything optional and the other has no parameters at all. So I will also copy this since this was also a little difficult for you. I'm taking only two complicated questions, but I'm also taking such questions so that it, it becomes a little easy for you. Other questions becomes easy for you. So this gives you error. Again, ambiguity as A and B are optional. So now in the same case, if I give 10, will it still give me the same error? If I send 10, if I don't send 10, observe this guys. If I just call it without any parameters, then it will surely give me an error. Let me compile this. Wait, where am I? Wait, there's something missing out here. So, yeah, perfect. Yes. So if I try this, if you compile this, you will get this error saying overloaded A is ambiguous. Whenever you call A, it does not, it has two candidate functions. One is with two integers, both are optional. Another with no parameters, it can go to either one of them. This is what it is saying. Now, if I make a small change, let's say I make a very small change by making this as, let's assume of 10. Now, will it still give me ambiguity error or will it say, hey, first one has no parameters, second one has parameters? What we are sending is, in the previous case, there were no parameters. So it could go to either one. But in this case, since I'm sending a number, it can only go to one of these functions and it won't give me an error. So will this work? Will this execute and print whatever it is supposed to print? Will it still give me an error or will it work? My question is, you can let me know if it works, let me know it works. If it does not, let me know it won't. Right. I've got a lot of different answers saying it works, it won't, and so on. So it does work because whenever you call, whenever you have ambiguous functions like this, they only give you an error if you call those ambiguous functions in that way. If you don't, then it won't work. This is the basic concept. Um, DSN algorithms, we have around 8 to 9 hours. We will begin in the session, possibly end of today or next session. Don't worry, we have enough time to work on it. If you're not good enough with this, you can not go to that right now. Understand that very clearly though first, because I need you guys to be able to answer as many questions as possible. So let us go back to this. Now that we are clear with this concept, now whenever I have a constructor with all optional parameters, I do not need a default constructor because it does not make much sense. So I'll also copy this next program over here for your output. That should be 10 4, where we are sending 10. So going ahead with this, let's take, let's say for example, now let us get back to the interview question that we were discussing about earlier on and start this. Now that you understood the previous case, now go through this and let me know what could happen. Go through this for now, and you guys can observe and let me know whatever you think will happen here. I'll go to this later. Just observe this now, guys. So take a minute if you require. I want you guys to let me know what could possibly happen here. I've got one answer that is yes, finally. See, observe this. Here, you have ambiguity in base class. I'll tell you guys what exactly happens. The moment the derived class object D is called, or the moment the derived class object D is created, the first thing it will do, whether you create a derived class um, constructor, whether you create a derived class constructor or not, the first thing it will always do by default is called superclass constructor. When it calls superclass constructor, it's going to call superclass constructor as base. So first thing you guys need to know is, if you write a derived class constructor here, like for example, let's take this. If you write a derived class constructor, let's say derived, okay, this color is too bad to even observe. I'll just change this so that it is visible for you guys. Yeah, perfect. So let's say you have something like derived D. The moment you create an object, it's going to call its default constructor. Its default constructor will be something like this. And um, in its default constructor, if you create a constructor by yourself, by default, it will call base by itself, whether you write it or not, as the first line. If you don't create such a constructor, this is the default definition of a derived class constructor, default definition. So it is calling base. Once it calls base, my question to you guys is, will it call this base function or this derived, this constructor? Will it call the first or the second constructor? Remember, guys, it's ambiguity. It will call neither. It's ambiguity. Remember the previous example we took. This gets optional. It does not know which one to call. It will give you an error saying ambiguous. So if you execute this, it will say error, call of overloaded function is ambiguous. It doesn't know which one to call. So let me go back to this code first. Have I? Yeah, I have not saved this. Sorry, because we changed the function name. I had not saved the function. Now, if I call this, I'm getting one error. Okay, see out. I'll just make sure we'll add iostream as well as using namespace std. Yes, exactly as you guys stated, compiler gets confused. It does not know which one to call. So it's going to give you an error saying implicit, you don't know which of them should be called. This is the error. So let me we'll delete one of the base class constructors. If we delete one of the base class constructors and we run it again, now there are no errors. It has compiled. Now that it has compiled, now let me know, guys, what would happen now. This was the previous question I wanted to give. Now, this is the second part of the same question. Now, what will happen? Given that there is no ambiguity, what will happen? Now give it a try, guys. Take a minute if required, but I need you guys to let me know what happens here. All right, we've got one answer as 4, 3. What about others? Okay, I'm getting different answers. 4, 3, 3, 3, 6, 3, and 5, 5. Okay, we're getting a lot of different answers. So there's no one common answer. But if you execute this, you're getting only 4. And only one of you got it correct again. So let us see what exactly goes on here. So to observe this, let us go to our code here. And first thing that we're doing here is in this case, guys, for those who are answering two, for those who are giving two answers, remember when derived class object is created, it will call base constructor. But when derived class show is called, it will not go to base class show by default. It will only go to derived class show. Remember, it won't go to base class show by default. So just know that. So first step, we'll call derived class object. That means derived class constructor is called. There's no derived class constructor we have written. So let us directly go to base class constructor. This was not there. Let us remove this. There's no point in having this now. So we have two variables A and B. So A is having a value that is 0, B is having 5 because there are default values. Since we are calling just base, since we are calling just base without any parameters, it's going to take these default values. So it is going to store plus plus A into A. Let us pre-increment A and store it into A. When you pre-increment A will become 1. And that 1 pre-incremented value will be stored in this arrow mark A. We all know this arrow mark A will point to A of the object. After this, let us do the same for object B, minus minus B. So minus minus means pre-decrement this B value. Pre-decrementing, it will become 4. After pre-decrementing, you're storing it in B. That means this b value now becomes 4. Now this is clear. A is 1, b is 4. Now after this, we are calling d dot increment. Now does derived class have an increment function? Yes, it does. Since derived class has an increment function, it will call this. If it does not have an increment function, it will search for an increment function in its base class. Now derived class here has an increment function for us. Let us call it, let us print it, b plus plus. That means b is going to change from 4 down to up to 5. After this, we're calling d dot show, derived class show function. Here we are decrementing b, pre-decrement and then print. So decrement b to 4 and then print. Output becomes 4. That is all. It is not going to call base class show by default. Only derived class constructor calls base class constructor by default. Any other derived class function will not call base class function by default. This is your basic idea about it, and this is why your output here is 4. Is this clear, guys? All right, perfect. So let us go ahead with the next part of this. Now that we are clear with this, let's change the program again to a different kind of classes and objects. Again, I want you guys to observe this and solve this by looking at every part as detailed as possible. All right, so without wasting time, let's create the base class. Again, I'm going to use brackets in the same line so that you're able to see the whole code. So this time I'm going to use protected. You guys know protected means it is accessible where? Can you guys let me know where are the variables accessible if it is protected? Think through, guys. If it is protected, where are these variables? Let's call them as A and B. It's easy for us. Where are they accessible? Where can I access them? Can I access them outside the class? Is it only inside the class? If it can I access them using objects, what is the condition? By the time I type this program, can you guys let me know? Only within the class. Can I access it in my subclass? Yes, we can access it in the subclass given the condition. It should be accessible only within its subclass. It can't be accessible using the objects. So now that we know that, let's create a derived class. Now, there's going to be a couple of conditions that I'm going to do over here. You guys will observe. You guys will observe this very clearly. Okay, since I cannot have base with the same variable b while having this variable also b, I'm going to change the very object name of base as object base, just to make it differentiated. Please know that, guys. So this is your entire code. I'm just going to create a derived object since I have a class, since I have a constructor. I'm going to take 10 and 20 to that constructor, and that's pretty much it. This is all that I'm going to do. So I just need you guys to go through this, observe this for a minute, and think through what could possibly happen here. Again, as usual, I'm going to give you guys a minute of time at maximum. Let me know, guys, what do you think happens? This may be slightly confusing because I think this is the first time you're going through such a program. So if you're confused way too much, I'm going to give you guys a clue. I'm just going to compile it and tell you that it does compile. It does compile. Derived is not deriving it. Remember, I am not writing here colon public base. I'm not writing that. That means I am not deriving the base class. But still I'm not getting any error. And I have something here called colon. I don't know what that even means. Let us see. Tell me guys, what do you think could happen here? So I've got one answer as 10 and 20 itself. Others are still a bit confused. Not a problem. Let us compile it. Let us try it out. Uh, First thing, let me save this. After saving this, if you guys observe, see, first thing, I'm getting this is protected. Since the previous one was protected, I'll make this as public. I'll make sure this is public because remember, I have not inherited base class into derived class. It's just not inherited yet. Okay. So I'm just making it as public because of that reason. So now let me compile. Now here I do get an error saying, of course, there's a semicolon. Yes, perfect. See, this is what happens generally when I keep switching between C++ and Java, because in C++ you do need a semicolon, in Java you do not. Now, the moment you go here, you still have one small error because of course this is also private. I'm accessing it with the object. Guys, please bear with this. I've been working through Java pretty much most of the times as of late for a project. That's why I'm not putting up public. By default, remember, in C++, everything is private. If it's Java, you can access it with objects by default. So anyway, let's get back to this. Now observe this, guys. You can write it as this is a public function itself. So to make it much more clear. So this is your entire code. So if I do compile it, there's no error at all, right? So we've got a base class and we've got a derived class, and derived class is not inheriting base class. So their names are base and derived, but derived does not inherit base. So even though derived does not inherit base, if you execute this, your output comes up something like 200. The reason it comes up with 200 is because we are multiplying it here. Observe. Let me explain what exactly happens here. Now, this is a very important concept, that is using colon here, and it is called as instantiation list. This is called as an instantiation or initialization list. We generally call it as initialization list, and we use it for multiple cases. And I'll explain this particular case for you to start with. And then we'll go for a few more questions, particularly on initialization list. Now, the moment we create a derived object, it goes to the derived class constructor. We have to make sure that the derived class constructor is public before we go through it. Unless it is public, we cannot access it with its object. So once it is public, we'll access it. Then A will be sent and stored in the value 10. B will be stored with the value 20. So essentially, A will be replaced by 10, B will be replaced by 20. And before doing this, you guys need to know, before all the variables or before even the constructor executes, private variables are declared. Now, the moment private variables are declared, we will check if there are any constructors. Yes, there is a constructor, but this constructor is parameterized. So what happens here is this base object is only declared here. It is only declared, but it is initialized here. That is why we call it as initialization list. So using colon, we can do this. So all that we are doing here is defining a base object and we are initializing it with the same A value as 10 and B value as 20 that are sent. So that means A goes here and B goes here. Since you had default values, those are not taken. 10 and 20 are stored in A and B. Now after this, we are calling base object show. So object of base of show, it will go to this place where you are multiplying A into this arrow mark B. Now whether you do this arrow mark B or whether you write just B, there is no difference. You guys know that whether you write this arrow mark B, that means it is accessing B of this object. Whether you just write B, then also it is accessing B of this object. There is no difference. We have written this extra only to confuse you. There is absolutely no difference between them. So all you're doing is calculating A multiplied by B of this class. A is 10, B is 20. You're multiplying them and printing the value as 200. That is all. That is your entire output. So derived class is not inheriting base class, but even though we are creating an object and initializing in separate spaces, we can do that as long as we initialize it with this initialization list operator in the constructor. This will make sure A and B, whatever is sent into constructor, will also be sent to base class constructor because we are using this with initialization list. And when we call the base class dot show, it's going to go over here and print the value as 10 into 20, that is 200. This is going to be your output. So if nobody got this right, but you guys need to know that these are some sort of questions that you guys may expect and you may need to know about really well. Now, is this clear, guys? Can we go ahead to something different and much more smaller than this? Are you guys able to understand this? If so, I will take a much more smaller example than this. I'll just take a small class called just demo. And all I'm going to do here is make a private variable as a constant integer. Yeah, it's a constant integer. Remember this. And I'll make a public function that is its constructor. Now, here's what we're going to do in its constructor. Int, let's say x. I'm just going to write it as var of x. Now, this is also a type of initialization list, only I will tell you what it is, what it does, and why it is like this. Now, before I do this, before I explain this, first, let me take var equals x. I'll just keep it as 5. And I'll just call a show function, simple show function, to just print the output as cout var. That's it. Now, if we just create an object of demo d and send a value, let's say 10 into it, what will be the output? Simple question, guys. Observe this and just let me know. Have I copied the last program? Okay. Let me just check if I've copied the last program. Is this the same one? Now I have not copied the last program, so I'll make sure to do the same. So the output of the last program was 200. Perfect. So now, okay, I can't redo again. Okay, this is one small issue. Okay, let me just type it out very quickly for you guys since I cannot redo this. Alright guys, this is your small function. All I need you guys to let me know is what will be the output over here. That's it. Think through guys, think through and let me know what could possibly happen here. I've got one answer as 10. Now, to counter that answer as 10, let me ask you guys. We are calling a constructor with a parameter. Now, one thing you need to know, I'll just compile this first. Whenever, remember, again, as usual, since it is C++ and not Java, perfect. So here, it gives you one particular error here. That is, it says you cannot exactly now. Its cout statement is fixed. Now it gives you an error. If you try solving this, this is the error you get. You're sending 10 over here and you're storing it into a variable var. But when you store it into a variable var is a constant. Since it's a constant value, you cannot change a constant value. So you'll always get an error whenever you try to change a constant value, as you cannot change or you cannot assign a read-only member. You cannot assign a read-only variable. Now, that is the error I'm getting. Now, because I'm getting that error, I'm gonna not initialize it. I'm only gonna declare it. Will I be able to initialize it to 10 now? My second question, I will not declare it. I will not initialize it. I will only declare the constant variable. If I declare, I must be able to initialize it once. So will this give me the output as 10? I'm getting an answer as no. If I try it, of course, I'll get an error saying uninitialized member const int. That means you have a constant variable which should be initialized, which is not initialized. Every constant variable must be initialized. If you don't, you will get an error. Now, I'll change this to make it an empty constructor, and I will write ahead of it an initialization list called var of x. Now let us see if this works. If I compile, first up, I am getting an unexpected qualifier. Okay, I'm not supposed to have a semicolon. Perfect. So let's compile this. Now I'm getting no error. Now, guys, if I remove this and save this and run this, I'm getting an error saying const integer variable must be initialized. If you don't initialize a constant variable, you can't run a program. So for this program, it says error const variable must be initialized. Without initialization, you get error. Now, to modify this, what I'm doing over here is just writing this at the end of a constructor. If I do this and compile, it does not give me any error. If I execute, it's pretty much doing nothing because I'm not calling show. Let me call g.show to print the value. If I compile it and execute now, it's giving me 10. But any constant variable declared should be initialized. Otherwise, I should get an error. Why is this not giving me an error? Particularly because in C, whenever you're having a constructor and you have a const variable which is only declared, which is not initialized, which isn't initialized, you can initialize it in the initialization list. In the initialization list block, you can initialize it as var of x. So whatever x is sent in the constructor, it will be initialized in the constant variable. This is the one specific example you should know. Now, this is something you will never be able to see in most interview books, also in most textbooks, also nowhere else. But you need to know this basic concept. You can create an initialization list where whatever you essentially create, as in if you have a constant variable which is uninitialized, you can initialize it here. This is the condition. So now, yes, I have another question, nice question, that also I will go for up next. But before going to that, let me just write this down. Output here is 10 because a constant variable which is uninitialized can be initialized via a initializer list block in constructor. This is one basic thing we need to know. Now, similar to this, we also know that static variables cannot be declared without initializing. Can I do the same here? My question, will it still give me 10 here? That is all my question is. What do you guys think? Any guesses, guys? What do you think? Let us try. If you compile, you'll get an error saying it's a static variable member. It can be initialized only at its definition, not over here. If it's just a regular integer variable, then yes, when you execute it, whatever you send, it's going to be printed. But static variables cannot be initialized in constructor. They have to be initialized when declared. And when declared, if you want to initialize it, you have to initialize it outside the class simultaneously as well. That is the only way it works. So this is also one basic thing we need to know. Again, just know that these sort of questions may be very well asked because they have specified C, object-oriented programming, that is C++, and then data structures and algorithms as the three major parts of this. So let's just go to one more final case in the same example. Let me go to one more final case. Can I make this constant and make this as let's say a reference, and whatever user is sending, I will read it as a reference, and that reference I will store it in VR. Will this also work? 10 is being sent to X. I am taking the reference of X, and reference of X is getting stored in another reference variable called VR. Can I do this? Think about it. It's similar to this. I have an int A or a reference variable A. I'm storing, let's say, 500 here in reference variable A, and I'm just taking into reference variable B and I'm storing A. So this means B is also pointing to same value A is also pointing to same value A. So can I do this? Will this print 10? That is all my question is. I'm giving you guys just 10 seconds or 15 seconds. Just type an answer and let me know, guys. I need as many of you guys to type an answer and let me know, because your responses are very much needed. We will also have a few tests, small tests based on such questions further on in our final sessions if possible. But let us get back to this. If you compile this, you get an error. The error is because, always remember, whenever you store any value in a remember, reference points to same address. If you guys remember, reference points to same address. When references points to same address, this 10 is a constant. It does not have address. It does not have an address at all. Since it doesn't have an address, it gives you an error saying you are pointing a reference to a constant, which cannot be done. So one way to solve this is, let me write here again. The error you get is cannot point reference variable to a constant. So if you make a small change here, that is, instead of 10, write a here and give something like int a equals 10. And if you try to compile this and run this, you're going to get the output as 10. So remember, a reference variable can point to a value. Like here, when you try this, you have a reference variable a, which can point to, which can be sent and pointed to by a, you have a regular variable a, sorry, which can be pointed to by a reference variable x. So x is your reference variable, which points to address of a. Since this is no longer a constant, it has an address. It is stored in some address called 100. So this reference variable will store address 100. That 100 is sent to variable var. So var will also store, will also point to address 100, which has same value. So when you print this, it's going to go to that address and print 10 itself. So this is basically how it works. Is this clear, guys? Are you guys able to understand such questions? My only question to you guys, are you able to understand such questions? If yes, then I will stop as much as possible within C++, and I'll try to go through some introductory concept later on, some introductory concept of data structures in a while, if you guys have all understood this. Now, since you've understood this, I just have a string program I wanted to do as of yesterday, which I did not. So I'll just take that up. See guys, you can expect string function programs, but I guess we have done enough C++ programs over the last 2-3 days. Let us go to the very basic concept of data structures. Let us try understanding what they are and what sort of questions we can expect and so on. See, in Capgemini, let me point to exactly what they have been asking, what sort of questions they have particularly been asking. They have been asking, one of the question is, given different sorting algorithms, which has better time efficiency? This is one question they're asking. Unless you know what those sorting algorithms, how they work, you can't do this. So one of the things we'll start learning up next later on, after we start with data structures today, is what sort of different sorting algorithms you have, how do you work around with them, and so on. Now, the second thing you can expect is, okay, find time complexities. Another thing you can possibly expect is code of hashing or binary trees or linked lists, and point error line. Which line has an error is something you have to find out, and they will give you a code of this. This is one thing you may expect as well. We will see how to work around with that also. And third, code of sorting algorithms, and you have to point error line, and you have to fix that error. So you can't do this unless you know the sorting algorithm, unless you know how exactly that sorting algorithm works. You cannot do that. So we will try to go through these. Now, before we do that, I want to ask you guys one question. Do you guys know all the sorting algorithms, or do you guys want me to go through them once? Because you won't be able to solve point error line unless you know the sorting algorithms, like quick sort, merge sort, selection sort, insert sort, heap sort, bucket. There's tons of sorting algorithms. We're only going to go through 7 or 8 major ones they will ask. So what I will be doing is, I will be explaining the program to you guys. Yes, priority queue as well. That is also possible. So such programs can also be asked. Now, not programs specifically, but they may give you some functions. Now, for okay, we'll go through that in basics. Don't worry. I will also explain you guys what other algorithms are there, what techniques are there in algorithms, like divide and conquer and all these kind of things, and how do we use them, how do we work around with them, what sort of algorithms are there, how are they used in real life, so that you can get a better clarity as well. And we'll try to spend a little part of it for each part of these things. So let's go ahead for the next thing that you may expect. So you may be given traversals of trees, and they will expect you to find out something using pre-order or in order or post order traversals. They will ask you either error in code, or they will ask you something like, instead of error in the code, they may even ask you if there is something like 3 to or let's say one expression to another expression conversion, or you can expect something like gate type questions, like if a binary tree has n elements and this it is this kind of a binary tree, how many levels are there, or what is the height of it, or how many nodes are there? These are some basic sort of questions that you may expect. So I want us to go through all of these. This is the idea for our data structures concept and algorithms concept. Also, we will try to go through not just sorting, to other concepts like what is divide and conquer, what will be time complexities and everything. And to learn all of these, the basic thing you guys need to know is time complexity. Unless you know this, you will not be able to solve any of these. Now, let us start with the first concept. What exactly is time complexity, and how do we calculate it? What's the point in it and everything? Now, take this particular code. Now, you guys know that you have a clock function to access how long your code is taking. Do you guys know that? Let me know, guys. Yes, it is used to calculate running time of the code. Exactly correct. So that is something you can use by yourself to understand how this works. So I'll just give you a clue of it. So some of you don't know, some of you know. I'll just take a very simple example. To do that, you need something called, always use hash include time.h. Without time.h, you can't use the clock functions. So let's say if you want to start this, you can have something like, let's say, a double value um, called time spent. Let us make it initially as 0, or you can write it 0.0, up to you. I'll just make it as 0. Now, to begin the work, just use clock underscore t begin equals clock function. This will start your time. Then you do whatever function you want, like for int I equals 0, I less than equal to and I plus plus, something like this. So here you can just do, since I want to make it a little bit slower, I'm gonna make it here as I equals I plus 2, and here I'm gonna make a small function I minus minus. So essentially it's increasing by 1 at a time. Yeah, in online compiler it won't be there. You won't be able to see all of this. But I'm showing you this if you want to learn more about time complexity by your own, because we will be using this for our sorting algorithms. That is why I want to show you this, because we'll be using this for our sorting algorithms. I just wanted to show. So at the end, after all your work is done, you can just do clock underscore t end, create one more variable called end, and take the time at that point of time. So if you want to get the seconds, just or instead of printf, here you have cout, just write your double value, that is time spent, is where we need to store the result first. Let us store the result. Either you can store the result or you can directly calculate it and write it down. So let me just store it for now. Time spent equals, convert whatever value you get in double by default, because why not? um, End minus begin divided by, it gives you in clocks per second. So however many clocks per seconds are there in your computer, you can do something like this. So cout, just type time spent, you'll get a clear idea of how much time is spent by your program. So here you're going to get, it is spending so many seconds, 0.29 seconds is what it is spending. So this is how it pretty much gives you a detailed way of how long it spends to do something. Now, using this, you can get to know how long it takes for a particular um, program to work. But this is not the case in every computer, because my computer may be faster or slower than your computer. Both of our computers will not give you the same output, same case. So to make sure that we are all able to find out how long it takes to execute a particular code in whichever computer it is, we use a concept called asymptotic notations. So before going with this, first let me ask you guys, are you guys familiar with all the three asymptotic notations? That is big O, omega, and theta, or do you guys want me to go through them once? What they are? You're familiar with it? Okay, you guys can let me know, because no sir or yes I'm confused. Um, just let me know if you're familiar, just say familiar, or if you want me to explain this, just say explain. That's enough. I'll be able to understand. Okay, pretty much everyone is not familiar with this. All right, this is the basic, very basic concept, or based on which your entire concept of um, time complexity works. So asymptotic notation are just, or asymptotic notations, they help with defining how much time your program takes using a mathematical boundary. They call it as a boundary. We use a boundary concept here to get to know how long your program takes. So those boundaries are measured in three types. One is called best case, another is called average case, and the last one is called worst case. Now the one that we need to know is always the worst case. Now why are we not focusing on best case and average case, and why are we only focusing on worst case? Think about this. You are going from your home to your college. Best case, you can go in 5 minutes. It is exam today. Let's assume it is exam today. So you have to be there in time. You can't be late. It's not a regular class. So best case, you can go in 5 minutes. Average case, you can go in like 6 minutes. Worst case, if there's a lot of traffic and you have to face signals and everything, you can go there in 8 or let's say 10 minutes. So that means you will definitely leave 10 minutes early because you're thinking about the worst case only. So same is what we do in programming as well. We think about the worst case scenario to get to know whether our program takes longer in worst case or not. Because when your program takes, you don't know how user input will come up and so on. So when your program can do well in the worst case scenario, that means your program is good. This is basic concept of this. Now, to understand how these are calculated, we specify it as worst case as big O, average case as theta notation, best case as omega notation. So this is how we pretty much specify it. Now, to understand this, first you guys need to know to calculate all of this, we use functions like f of n and g of n and everything. I'm just gonna give you guys this basic concept. Without this basic concept, there's no point in understanding rest of data structures. This is the foundation of it. This is like ABC of data structures, guys. So here, we got to know that the best case means minimum time required for the entire program to execute. This is average time required for entire program to execute. This is worst case, or let's say maximum time required for the entire program to execute. To understand this better, take an example of a search. You have 5 elements. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, what is the best case if you're finding an element? It is 1. It is found in the first part. That's the best case. So you will call it as only one step is required. So you can say it is omega of 1. Likewise, average case, I will not go to average case for now. Average case, we generally go for it is in last element and everything. Why is that? To understand that, call, we need to learn what is f of n, what is g of n, how do we go between f of n and g of n. We need to learn all of that. So average case, let us learn that in detail once we go for functions and graphs. But remember, what is the worst case here? Element is not found. You're searching for an element 6 which is not found. You'll search first one, second, third, fourth, fifth. So you have searched all the elements, it is not found. So how many elements have you searched? All n elements. So how many search have you performed? N times. So since you have performed n times, your worst case scenario here is big O of n. This is how it works. Generally, you need to find out worst case scenario. This is how you get to know how good your algorithm is. Take one example. If you have this, now this will help you understand perfectly why worst case scenario is needed for us. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 10. Now, if I'm searching for 11, worst case scenario, you're searching for all 10 elements, you're performing 10 comparisons, you're not finding it. That is your linear search. In binary search, since your array is in order, in an ascending order, I'm searching for 11. I'm going to split it in the middle. I'm going to search if my middle element is 11. I'll take this as my middle element. Is it 11? No. Since it is not 11, I will not consider any of these and I will go here and search for this as my middle element now, because this 11 is greater than this value. Since it is greater than and it is ascending order, it must be ahead of this. Now here, when we go for here, again I'll search for 11 here. It is not equal to key, it is greater than key, so we must go ahead. So if I search something like, let's say here, 11 up next, half of this is this, let's assume. So here I still don't find it and I can't go further anymore. So I stop the comparison. So how many comparisons have we done here? Pretty much 3. So how many comparisons did we do earlier? 10. Isn't that a huge difference? It is. So how do I find time complexity of this one? Because I've done 3. I've cut it by half at a time and everything. So how do I find time complexity of this program at all? Because it's not something like n or n minus 1, n minus 2 or something like that. This is something entirely different. So this is where you guys need to know what time complexities are there to begin with. So you guys need to know that time complexities work in this following order. This is the most important part you need to know. So before this, are you guys able to know why we are going through worst case? Because in best case scenario, whether I go for, in best case scenario, whether I go for one in linear search, best case scenario, one is faster, it is only big of one. But in binary search, if I want to search for one also, I have to search here, cancel everything, then I have to search here, cancel all of these, then I have to search here. So for binary search, best case scenario is taking a lot of time for one, whereas for linear search, it is taking less time. But worst case scenario, we know that binary search is better than linear search. So which one is important? Best case or worst case? Which is more important for our program? So I've got a question. What is middle element searching uh, best case in binary? Yes, you can say searching for middle element is best case, but we will look at that later on. We will go through how best case is assumed later on when we go for each algorithm. I understand your question is important. Yes. So worst case is more important because when numbers are huge, when the whole array is huge, you need to know how long it takes. So that is why worst case scenario is always more important. Now that we know worst case scenario is important, these are the kind of worst case scenarios you have. There is big O of log n, there is big O of just n, there is n log n, there's log n log n, and if I'm not wrong, I think yeah, n square, there's then n cube. After n cube, you have n to the order of 1, and then you have 2 after this. Let me write the last one here, 2 to the order of n. This is the order in which it grows. Log n is the smallest worst case. Big O of n is the next worst. This is more time. This is more time. And this is more time. And this is more time. And this is the worst time. So this is how we calculate it. Now, in the next session, we're going to see which algorithm takes up how much and how do we calculate it. But before we go for those algorithms, we need to first learn a few simple basic data structures to work with it. That is linked lists and arrays. We need to know arrays and linked lists clearly. We need to see what kind of questions are expected in here, and we will apply time complexity in this as well to begin with, to understand. So in our tomorrow's session, we're going to apply um, all of these concepts, all time complexities, into basic of linked list arrays and everything, and then go for applying the same into sorting, searching algorithms and everything. So that is how we're gonna go. Alright guys, so before we end, I'm just gonna share the document. So by the time, let me know guys how you guys felt about today's session. Was it since we've worked through, yes, they will ask theory questions also, and those theory questions I will explain how to solve them, particularly using these algorithms and data structures concept. Because theory questions you will expect from algorithms and data structures, yes, and we will go through them and see how to solve them. We'll do that. So before we end the session today, guys, no, generally they don't ask for best case at all. No way. But still, we will learn a little bit about it so that we know enough about it. That even if they ask some question randomly, we should be able to answer. Okay, so I'll just save this. So by the time I share this, just let me know, guys, how you felt about today's session. Were you guys finding it easy or difficult, or like how was it? You guys can let me know so that it becomes easy for me to understand whether you guys are easily able to understand it or not. All right, this is the complete content. And one of you wants only today's notes separately. All right, for only today's notes, let me just open a new one and I'll just copy the same. So by the time, please let me know, guys, because we have completed almost all of C++. So I want to know whether you guys feel like I'm going on with too much complicated stuff, or are you guys understanding it, or am I making complicated things easy, or am I making easy things complicated? Whatever it was, you guys let me know. So I think these are all were done today. Until here, it was okay. These were done today as well. Yes, perfect. I think yes, this was the first. This is also done today. Today we started with the pointers, if I'm not wrong. So let me go for the pointers part where we did it. Since one of you wanted only today's sessions. Yes, I think yeah, this is it. It was an array of pointers, a different question. Yes, perfect. This is it. So I'll share only today's stuff in a separate notepad. Okay, so these are only for today. So thank you for the nice feedback. I'm happy to always read your feedback, whether it's positive, critical, anything. So Rohit, Umar Shankar, and Ankita, Vinayaki, and again Rohit, thanks a lot for the really kind words. Okay, thanks a lot. And Pooja as well. All right, guys, thank you for stating that you guys are able to understand. That helps me make sure that we are going in the right order and right way. So we'll catch up tomorrow and work with continue with data structures, guys. Have a good night.